Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Culture Speaker Series. My name is Ed Finn, a professor in the School of Arts, Media, and Engineering. Very happy to welcome our guest today. Jennifer Lee is an entrepreneur, documentary producer, journalist, seed investor, emoji activist, all around fascinating and amazing person. A former New York Times reporter, Jenny is the author of the New York Times bestselling book, The Fortune Cookie Chronicles. She served as the producer of The Search for General So and The Emoji Story, both of which premiered at Tribeca Film Festival. She's also an executive producer for The Price, which premiered at South by Southwest, and an associate producer for Give Me Liberty and the Emmy-winning Chasing Coral, both of which premiered at Sundance. She's the co-founder and CEO of Plimpton, a literary studio that innovates in digital publishing, a co-founder of the Credibility Coalition and MisinfoCon, organizations that tackle misinformation, and co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Futures Council for Media, Entertainment, and Sport. She's also the founder of Emojination, a grassroots group whose motto is emoji by the people, for the people. As part of that organization, she successfully lobbied for something that I'm going to let her tell you about, along with a couple of some other really important, significant emojis. And she co-founded EmojiCon and is a vice chair of the Unicode Emoji Subcommittee. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer Lee.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you how I fell down.
Jennifer, could you share your screen?
Oh.
Sorry, it's not sharing.
It's not sharing. That's funny. Did we stop because I was told to stop sharing? But now share.
Now share.
Now share. This share. Boop. Oh, what happened now? Does that work? Oh. Better?
Yeah.
Oh, but
Yes, you're coming through.
How about yours?
but my little zoomy thing is there now. Oh, well, whatever. I'll hide it in the corner.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. I'm going to talk about my journey into the deep emoji rabbit hole, and just sort of about the world and emoji in general. So one thing that is now strange is I can't advance. What do you think that is about?
Try clicking into your screen.
Oh yeah, there's something where. Okay, good. Yeah. I had this problem once before where you like zoom out. Okay, so my emoji story starts with my friend Ying Liu, who is a designer famous for creating the Twitter fail well. So she is Chinese-ish. I'm Chinese-ish. We were texting about dumplings because that is what Chinese-ish women do often. And so I sent her a picture of dumplings I was cooking, and she was like, yum, 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 yum. And then she's like, oh, there's no dumpling emoji. Apple has no dumpling emoji. And I was like, oh, good point. And it's one of those things where like life goes on and you don't, I'm sure many people in this world have thought like, oh, there's no emoji for something. And then just life goes on. And then half an hour later, up pops this dumpling with heart eyes on my laptop, onto my phone. And like, you don't see it here, but it also had like flashing eyes. It was like, she called it bling bling dumpling. And so basically she had decided to make her own dumpling emoji. And, because she was a designer, she's like, there's no dumpling emoji. I will solve this problem. And so I was actually really perplexed. Like, why is there no dumpling emoji, given that from my perspective, dumplings are universal. So, there's a lot of Japanese foods in the dumpling set. There's ramen, there's bento boxes, there's curry, there is tempura. There's even sort of like slightly more obscure ones, like this like thing on a stick, which actually turned out to be fish cakes. There's this like swirly, like pink and white, again, fish cakey thing. There's even like this rice cake that looks like it's had a bikini wax. All things that are on the emoji keyboard, but there were no dumplings. And that struck me as really strange because like dumplings are this universal food. They are, whether or not empanadas or ravioli or pierogi or kinkali or momo, this like whole idea of like yummy goodness within like a carbohydrate shell, and whether or not steamed, baked, or fried, that every culture has figured this out. Emoji, this is back in 2015. We're also this kind of universal curated visual language, or on all phones. Different people in different cultures could use them. One kind of curated set. So dumplings were universal. emoji were universal. And the fact there was no dumpling emoji told me that the system in place had failed. So I just like was trying to figure out, okay, later, is that good? I was like, I knew nothing about emoji at that point, and I was like, who controls emoji? So you Google, and you basically learn that you end up at something called the Unicode Consortium, which is a nonprofit organization based in Mountain View, California, that has, at that point when I looked, 12 full voting members. This is late 2015, and they were like large US multinational tech companies. So there's Oracle, there was IBM, Microsoft, Adobe, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Yahoo. And of the companies that were not large multinational US tech companies, there was a German company called SAP, there was a Chinese company called Huawei, and then very weirdly, there was the government of Oman was basically one of the main like full members of Unicode. So at that point, they paid $18,000 a year to have full voting authority in Unicode. So lots and lots of money. I was actually somewhat indignant about this, that this like powerful consortium of companies paid this exorbitant amount of money to like control emoji. But there's like this kind of weird little loophole, which is that for $75, you can join as a non-voting individual member. You have no voting rights, zero voting rights, but you can be on the mailing list and you have like the right basically to go to their quarterly meeting. So, I signed up, $75 credit card. I was like, I'm on this path to make a dumpling emoji and got on the mailing list. And then I don't know, it was probably October of 2015. There was an email that went out that said like, our next quarterly meeting is in Apple's offices in, I think it was in Sunnyvale at that point. And I looked at my calendar and I was like, I will be in the Bay Area at that time. So I took Caltrain public transit to the Apple headquarters. And I don't know completely what I was thinking I would see when I got there. Like maybe like a little like mini Congress, like the little circuit, kind of like an auditorium, people with gavels and whatever. That is not what I found. This is the room where, this is in 2015 actually, where all the emoji decisions were being made. This is the full Unicode Technical Committee. And these were the people who were our emoji decision makers at that time. And one of them had a sense of humor. His daughter had made him a shirt that said "Shadowy Emoji Overlord." And so I was like kind of baffled. This population definitely skewed, older, it's skewed male, it's skewed tech, it's skewed white. There are a bunch of immigrants there because, Silicon Valley engineers. So I created a group with Ying called Emojination, whose motto is emoji by the people, for the people. And we sort of like wanted to fight for more inclusive and representative emoji. So we actually then did an emoji dumpling project on Kickstarter. We actually did, we made a cute little video and raised a bunch of money. We kind of basically like walked about the fact that there was lots of dumplings around the world, mandu, ravioli, pierogi, there's palmini, there were empanadas, right? There's actually crepe block, like pot stickers. Clearly dumplings were this kind of universal thing. And so I, worked with Ying to do a dumpling emoji proposal because like basically anyone could have proposed, an emoji at that point. So we wrote this proposal. Along with the dumpling, we also got takeout box, chopsticks, and fortune cookie. I honestly feel like fortune cookie would not have made it by itself, but it kind of slid in on the coattails of the other three. And so these were the ones that we kind of proposed originally. This was back in fall of 2015. And this is them now. And you have to see, like, I actually like the dumpling looks like very realistic, almost like edible, almost edible. The fortune cookie is a little bit weird because it like looks like this like dead Pac-Man because there's no slit. It's like a very weird thing, but whatever. So how are emojis accepted? So it's kind of interesting. Let's say you come up with an idea, then you basically write your proposal and then you submit it into this thing called the Emoji Subcommittee, which, will have its feedback. They might like want revisions, and if they do, they'll send it back to you, and they'll, it kind of goes around and around until they get a happy proposal that they are satisfied with. And then once that happens, they kick it to the full Unicode Technical Committee for like assessment. So what are the factors for an emoji being included? So there are many, but one is that they think it would be popularly used or frequently requested. So very much like this idea that something is already visually important as an icon. Multiple usages and meanings are actually great. So an example of an emoji that was proposed, but hasn't really, or I think has, could be a very good one is phoenix, which is both a bird, but can also mean like rebirth. So those kinds of ideas where you have a concept, like vulture as a bird, but also has lots of connotations, or like hand symbols that can be interpreted different in different cultures. So key thing is that it should be visually distinct and it can be recognized in emoji sizes, because emojis are very small. And at certain times it's just really hard to see and really hard for it to be drawn. So like an example where I think something conceptually should totally be an emoji and it did not work out because no one could get an image that we were happy with in emoji sizes is the concept of cave, for example. And then river, which also kind of looks, it's very hard and weird to draw a river in emoji sizes. And then another important factor, less important now than before, is this idea of like filling a gap or a completeness. So a good example for this was, for a long time, there was red heart, yellow heart, green heart, blue heart, and purple heart. There was no orange heart. And so one of the designers at Adobe, a man named Paul Hunt, really felt his rainbow collection of hearts was incomplete. So he proposed an orange heart, and now you can, basically assess and express yourself in all colors of the rainbow. So factors for or against inclusion, or say exclusion, if it's too specific or narrow, like that will often come with foods that are very important for one culture, but maybe not as universal. So I've seen poutine kind of, the Canadians really feel strongly about poutine, but it feels very specific as a kind of as a food, whereas like there's other things that can be made more generic, and those would kind of jump to the top of the priority list. So redundant, a good example for that is a couple of years ago, Butterball proposed a roast turkey. Given that there is a cooked turkey, it didn't seem like we should double down on the turkeyness. So we're like that they're fine with the live turkey, not visually discernible. Again, that kind of is the issue with like the cave emoji or the river emoji. And this one's kind of really important. So no logos, brands, deities, or celebrities. So no Nike swoosh, no like godlike characters or anything, no kinds of brands, no Trump emoji. Sometimes people will ask about that. So it has to be kind of like forever and not commercial. So once it kind of comes out of subcommittee, it gets kicked to the full Unicode Technical Committee, which is the people in the room that I showed you. And every so often they vote. It's actually usually consensus. It's very rarely contentious. And once a year, they basically approve a set of emoji that then gets kicked out. It gets synced with the International Standards Organization, which is much more of a government kind of standards body. And then when those are approved, everyone is very happy. It gets published into the world, and it then ends up in our devices. And it takes a really long time, basically about 18 to 24 months from when you submit a proposal is how long it will take on average before it gets on to your phone. That's assuming it like moves through a cycle. Like there are actually a bunch of emoji where like it doesn't rise to priority lists, and so it'll be like 2 or 3 years. Like we're like, yes, that should be an emoji, but it doesn't actually make it onto the phones. So it is a very, very, very long time. So we created this group called Emojination. There are many people who are active in it, and one of the kind of weird things is like why does this organization called Unicode control emoji? And a lot of it has to do with, if you go back and you look at the history of emoji. So the first sort of commonly cited set of color emoji is this set from Docomo in 1999. It's been collected by MoMA because it is so significant. And it's kind of fun because you can see some emoji that exist today, like whether or not it's, sort of fingers in a V, hearts, thumbs up. It has, like a maple leaf. Like it was very interesting to see in a 12 by 12 pixel world what emoji they decided were universal enough to make into like a form of text encoding. So essentially in 2007, what happened was you had, starting in 1999, you had all of the different carriers having their own emoji with, anyone who is using that carrier. So all the Docomo people could send the text between themselves. If you were SoftBank, you could send text and emoji, within someone else. But if you were sending it between carriers, that didn't work because there wasn't a standard. And like, whatever, that was, who would have cared? Except starting in about 2000, in the sort of mid to late 2000s, you had companies like Google and Apple trying to bring their smartphones into the Japanese market. And the Japanese folks were like, we're not going to get any smartphones unless they're sort of emoji, because they were so used to using these emoji. And you also needed to have the emoji sort of pass between both like a texting kind of SMS type format and email, right? So that people were expected to be able to cut and paste those emails. So they went to Unicode, and which has a history of standardizing text, and said, can you help? So why Unicode? So Unicode's mission is to enable everyone speaking every language on Earth to be able to use your language on computer and smartphones. So basically digitize your language. And they really do see it as an issue of human rights. It has 3 main projects. So it encodes characters, including emoji. Now there are over 100,000. So they're the ones who made sure Arabic worked on across all the devices, or Cyrillic, or Mongolian, or Chinese, Japanese, Korean. All of that is something that they secure and discuss and agree to. They also create what we call this CLDR, which is the Common Locale Data Repository, which is a lot of localization resources, so that that in Korea that the currency is won, whereas it might be the real in Brazil, and then timing, how do they like their time? How do they use interest, how they alphabetize different cultures? Very interestingly, alphabetize certain characters in unexpected ways. And then they also then have the program libraries that allow the programmers to not have to do everything from scratch, but they can just say things like alphabetize. So it's called CLDR, and if you say it really fast, it sounds like seal deer. Someone's girlfriend was very confused why he was always talking about seal deers, and so she basically bought a baby seal stuffed animal and then cut it open, and the seal basically did antlers on that. So from 2007 when they started, it took about 3 years for 2010 when they released the first standard set. So that's as part of Unicode 6.0. So if you look at these are the Apple sort of old, they have a sort of a retro look at this point. So it came out in 2010, and it was kind of bopping around. I think it was deep in the iOS, and unless you knew how to find it or how to break it out, a lot of people weren't using it. But then people figured it out, and then Apple actually made it much easier to add an emoji keyboard, and you can see the emoji kind of demand explode over time. What's kind of interesting is well, who can propose emoji? And it turns out anyone can. It used to be that you just email docsubmit@unicode.org. Now we have a Google form. So some of my favorite proposers is once it was a 15-year-old girl who is she's Saudi Arabian in Germany, and she wanted basically a hijab emoji. So she did that. She wrote a proposal in 2016. There's a group of Argentinians that fought valiantly for the mate emoji. There's also a nonprofit called Plan International that wanted a menstruation emoji, which was drew as bloody underwear, which is a terrible emoji for all kinds of reasons. So we helped them get a blood drop. So the very lovely 5 skin tones we have actually is not from Unicode originally, but from a mom and an entrepreneur named Katrina Parrott from Texas. That is her with her daughter. One day her daughter came home and said, I'd really like to see myself represented in emoji. And her mom was like, that's great, honey. What's an emoji? But she figured it out and then kind of basically did all of the work to get us to a 5 skin tone system. Woman's flat shoe, and then the one-piece bathing suit to differentiate from the very, very buxom bikini. It's from a mother of 4. She's 3 in this picture, and then there was another 4th girl that popped out. So this is one of my favorites. It's a face with one eyebrow raised, or as we like to say, the Colbert emoji. That was proposed by just like some dude in Germany who like felt really strongly that we needed this emoji, and now it exists. The Finnish government even got in on it. I mean, literally the government, this was like their equivalent of like the State Department, proposed like the sauna emoji. And these are like terrible images. Like, what is with their feet? They're naked and they're like little noodles like coming off of them. It was so wrong in so many different ways, but we helped them. So first we were like, okay, let's get rid of the feet. Let's, you know, we drew them, you know, with a ladle, no ladle, whatever, like steam, kind of basically got that approved. And then then the platforms got involved, and now it looks like person in a steamy room. It looks like, you know, they did not like the nakedness, so they essentially put towels on all of them. So you can see sort of the 3 generations, what the Finnish government proposed, what we helped them redesign, and then like how it ended up. It's a very strange, it was a strange process, but I really admired the Finnish government in terms of like throwing down for one of their cultural experiences. So one of the kind of questions people ask is like, why do you care so much about an emoji? And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I grew up, you know, speaking and writing Chinese. And it's actually some really interesting parallels between, you know, emoji and Chinese from way back when. Like, a lot of the concepts are still very universal. So this is fire, this is mouth, this is tree, this is moon, there is sun, and you can mix and match them in Chinese, right? So if you combine 2 trees together, you get a forest, basically. If you combine, let's see, a moon and a sun together, you get this concept that we call bright. So just like this idea of brightness. Then it gets like really fun when you start like dealing with like human things. So this is, it's basically a roof with a pig kind of in it. So you're like, oh, it's like farm, or it's like a barn or something. Actually, no, this means family. So, or home, sorry. It both means home and it means family. So this idea, like, your home is where your pigs are hanging out, is sort of like where what, you know, what that says about like Chinese culture way back when. And one of the characters that we use most in terms of radicals is this character Nui, which is woman. And, you know, I guess the idea is like she's like crossing her legs, or she's curtsying, whatever, but either way, it's a woman. So you learn all kinds of fun things as like a young Chinese kid learning to write your character. So there's a woman with a roof. So you're like, oh, okay, so that will mean home or family or something, right? Or like maybe wife, but no, it actually means peace. So things are at peace when the woman is under like the roof or at home, depending on your interpretation. Then this one's always really fun. So woman paired with child, mostly the implication is a male child, but it's child. You're like, okay, no, that means like family or mother or something. Nope. So that actually means good. So the standard for good way back when was a woman who had a kid, which I think is interesting for all kinds of ways. So the woman radical gets used in all kinds of weird ways. So like 3 women means evil. Like this one means greedy. This one means slave. This one means jealous. This one means betrayal or adultery. So, you know, I was like, you know, this was back in 2015. So, you know, there were all kinds of problems in the emoji keyboard back then. So for example, there are many ways to have a profession on the emoji keyboard if you're a man. So you could be a police officer, you could be a detective. Why? I don't know, but that was one of the things you could be. You could be a Buckingham Palace guard. You could even be Santa Claus. Like Santa Claus is one of the roles that you could have as, you know, a man in the emoji keyboard in 2015. But if you're a woman, there were exactly 4 things that you could be as in terms of profession. You could be a princess, you could be a bride, you could be a dancer, or you could be a Playboy bunny. Those were literally like all the occupations. So we like found this problematic for so many different reasons. And so obviously now there are ways that we kind of dealt with that. So one, we'll get into, so skin tones, you can combine emoji together. And the way that you see your skin tones is you have the original yellow emoji, and then we added, you know, the 5 color variations that are based on the Fitzpatrick scale, which also is originally kind of a designation designed for skin cancer. or your risk for skin cancer, but now has been appropriated to, there's 6 there, but there are 5 for all kinds of reasons. So 1 and 2 are collapsed in the lightest one. So then we also have this idea in Emojidom called ZWIJ, which stands for zero with joiner, which is like that character is often used for a couple ways. So one is like when you have like a ligature, like have you ever seen like Aesop's fables and the A and the E are kind of like squished together in that way? Sometimes in the text world, the way that the A and the E are kind of like told to stick together is that there's like an invisible character that glues them together. This character is also used a lot in Arabic, but you can glue emoji together. They decided at a certain point, we're gonna like compound emoji. So they combined, for example, rainbow and flag to get rainbow flag. And this was actually how we used this. We used this technique to get a bunch of occupations for women and for men, to be fair. So all of these, like from rock star to teacher to chef, there's often an emoji that is paired with them. So if you overuse a very, very old system, sometimes you'll see them burst apart. So, like a chef is a woman or a man with like the fried egg. Education is a woman or man in a school. So it's kind of quirky. It's kind of interesting. It's sort of there's a lot of pressure at that time to diversify the women, and so this is the system that we ended up with. We also used the system in order to come up with the couples holding hands. So how many emoji are, this is from a while back. There were at that point a lot. There's this, what's also super fun is like, you can get like all colors of Sienna, which I really liked. And skin tones on all kinds of like things that you don't necessarily think about having skin tones on. So I really like the mermaids and all their skin tones. There's a big debate about whether or not we give vampires skin tones. I remember this big debate because they're like, oh, we can just have like one. And I was like, whoa. I was like, have you seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Like clearly there are a lot of vampires with different skin tones. So on Apple, it's very strange because they have skin tones, but they're all variations of gray. So it's like light gray to dark gray. So one of the ones that we worked on with Tinder actually is the interracial couple emoji, which is like super hard, super hard to do because it was for the first time you had emoji more than one skin tone on an emoji, and so we had to kind of work on like coming up with the grammar for quote unquote grammar for that. It's nice because that is actually collected. Our work for that is actually collected in the Smithsonian's Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, which is cool. I definitely never thought about having any of our work kind of collected, but it was neat. And one of the hard parts was actually trying to figure out what the user interface for that would be inputting, because in terms of historically, like thumbs up, if you wanted to choose your skin tone, you do a long press and then pops up the choices, but now you have 2 choices. So this is how Apple did it. So in terms of Emojination emoji, here are some of the ones we've shepherded through. Some are very random. I'm actually very proud of the virus emoji or the corona. Like this is the year for what originally was a microbe emoji and now has become like the symbol for coronavirus. There is also soap was one of ours. There's a whole like contingent of people who really like broccoli. There is DNA I felt really good about, and yoga. We helped, that one is less like ours, but like we kind of pushed it through in the end. There is red envelope, on behalf of like Chinese holidays, and the lobster emoji on behalf of people from Maine. So here are some of the people who have worked on all kinds of Emojination proposals. It's sort of global from around the world. We had a bunch of people actually help out with Australian emoji, like the boomerang. So one of the interesting things is like how is the use of emoji, or how are emoji distributed in terms of their frequency? So one of the most surprising things we discovered is that literally 10%, these stats are a little bit old, but probably still approximately correct, which is approximately 10% of all emoji sent is the face with like tears of joy, like literally 9.9%. Then second is heart at 6.6. And then it has a very fun like power law factor going on. So, then the heart eyes, laughing, it very quickly goes down in terms of like the free flags are often, at the very bottom. So what is the future of emoji? There's a lot of debate. There's a Stanford professor who actually wrote this idea of whether or not you can, one day, can we come up with a standard to send instead of like these like 1s and 0s that, are encodings of emoji, we actually can send the actual images themselves, or an ability to look up like actual images. There's also a proposal that was floating around for a long time. I think it's finally died, which is, can we use the numbering system in Wikipedia? In terms of they have a numbering system in Wikipedia called QID. So the Eiffel Tower has a number, Barack Obama has a number, Earth has a number. That didn't do so well. So so actually one of the big things, this is actually a very good week and a very good day for me to do this talk, because as of like yesterday, they basically made public the emoji that are coming from 2022. And then there's no like drum roll or anything. They just like popped up a PDF on the Unicode document register. So here are some of the ones that you'll see. So first of all, there's huge demand for hearts. We're doing light blue, gray heart, and pink heart. Actually, one of the most interesting things about this idea of light blue is that some cultures have a name for light blue, like cyan, and it is distinct from dark blue. In the same way we have pink, and that is a distinct color in red in our language. But in some cultures, there's no word for pink. Like pink and red are sort of like the same color. So it's really interesting, kind of like muddling through and seeing all the ways that colors are represented in different languages. The first color, I think it's like white, then black, then red, then blue. I think those are almost always, there are only four words for colors in any language. Those are the first four. So we have wing, just one wing. There's no debate. One wing, two wings, whatever. When I guess in the end we just end up with one wing. I don't know that I agree with that, but it's one wing. Blackbird, goose. Not a fan of like the fowl kind of direction we went, but who am I wasn't, whatever. So then hyacinth, because it actually has a connotation for holidays. Jellyfish kind of slipped in there. I was a little bit surprised by that, but I think it was partially because they used the keyword, quote, man o' war, which turns out to be a very popular phrase on the internet for reasons I don't understand, but jellyfish kind of broke in. Then in terms of mammals, moose. So on behalf of the Canadians, we got beaver in from them a long time ago. There's actually a professor named Joan Donovan who worked on it. So she is lesbian and her wife is Canadian. So she really wanted the beaver emoji. And so she wrote the proposal and she told me that it would always be the first line in her bio. And indeed, you can go to her Twitter bio and it's like Joan Donovan, comma, creator of the beaver emoji, comma, is the director of research at the Shorenstein Center at Harvard University. So whenever it's actually a very fun thing to see that. So then donkey was one that took many years. This was kind of pushed by a bunch of Democratic friends. And I was submitted in 2019, but finally got passed this year. It was a big debate. Donkey, does it look like a horse? Should the ears be floppy? Should it be donkey head? Should it be donkey body? Should there be something on the back of the donkey? Should there not be something on the back of the donkey? So these were the foods that passed. Ginger, which also means root, and then pea pod, which debate peas, pea pod, like all kinds of things. In the end, we decided it was this image and it was going to be called pea pod. Then wireless symbol. So this is interesting. Could not be called Wi-Fi because that actually is a trademark word. So we call it wireless. And then conda, which huge debate about that, because one of the issues is that conda as a black and white character already exists in Unicode. And in the early days of Unicode, when they created the emoji set, they decided to take a bunch of these black and white characters that exist in Wingdings and basically give them like an emoji, like they could be emojified. So 3 basically come to mind. So one is heart emoji, one is like a finger pointing emoji, and I forget what the third one is. But what happens, and you'll see this in a bug sometimes, like they're in theory, the idea was like, here's a character, and then if you're a very good programmer, you'll tell them like emoji status on, emoji status off, right? Turns out a lot of people are very lazy when it comes out to like doing that. So you will have the emojis kind of burst out sometimes in color when they're not supposed to be in color, sometimes they're in black and white when they're supposed to be in color. And as a result, they decided never to emojify anything again that was already existing in black and white. Common character exists in black and white, and it was actually really tricky because there was like, well, we can't emojify it, but everyone like, we already have a character for you in Unicode, but like deep in the bowels of Unicode, but no one is actually going like like if it's not on the emoji keyboard, realistically, people are not accessing it. So big debate. Oh, so many hours spent discussing it. We finally got it through, so we're very happy. It was the largest religion that was not represented actually on the emoji keyboard. This is interesting. Shaking face. I don't know. I don't know completely what it means or whatever, but I don't completely understand how it got through the statistics battle. But oh, and these are sure folding hand fan. So originally was submitted as electric fan. Then the whole debate about, you know, once an emoji, always an emoji. We don't like things that have that don't have a sense of longevity. So they still very much regret having like the floppy disk emoji kind of exists, or the fax machine emoji exists. So they like things that have been around for like thousands of years. So they went with the folding hand fan. And then hair pick, which is a lot of debate about how to represent African hair or Afro hair. And because we did curly hair in part to address that, but different cultures, or something, not cultures, different platforms have like done the curly hair differently. So sometimes it looks a little bit more Afro-ish. Sometimes it just looked like curly, you know, wavy hair. And that was not satisfying to a lot of people who kept on writing to us. So hair pick was one of the things that we passed. Maracas and flute, musical instruments. Musical instruments are a tricky one because there's so many different variations of very similar themes. So you're like, you notice this flute is sort of more of a classic wind instrument as opposed to like the like a metal flute. So anyway, those are, you guys, you know, anyone who's shown up this probably is at the first tour of the new 2022 emoji that anyone has seen, because I promised, since they were just released yesterday publicly, I'm sure none of the other emoji subcommittee members are giving a talk or have given a public discussion. So if you have any questions, you can reach me at emojination.org, Jenny at emojination.org. We have a Slack, very active Slack group that's attracted all kinds of people, including the world. He was third in the world of the yo-yo championship. So there's now a yo-yo. You know, there was like a professional accordion player who got the accordion through. There was one guy who actually just felt like allium the allium family was underrepresented in Emojidom, so he got onion and garlic packs. Like he had not a farmer, just someone who really liked onions and garlic. He also had a proposal for leeks, but that didn't get through. So yeah, he's hilarious. Anyway, so that's it. Do I stop sharing?
Yep.
Okay. Wait, to admit. What?
We have some time for questions.
Yes. How do I get questions?
Can I ask a question?
Okay. Are you asking as you or on behalf of like someone in the chat?
I'll ask on behalf of myself first,
Okay.
but if people in the chat have questions, they can also ask questions. There was a controversy I remember about stacking hamburgers, right?
Yes.
The order in which you stack hamburgers.
Yes, that was a Google issue.
A Google issue.
Yes.
So as an emoji committee, do you attempt to ensure compliance with all of the device manufacturers and OS manufacturers?
Let me think.
So like they had the lettuce in the wrong place, or the
Yes.
cheese in the wrong place, right?
Yeah, it was underneath the meat.
Huh.
Wait, I have a question. So they just see me, they don't see my screen at this point?
They just see you and not your screen. You can
Okay.
share your screen
Yeah, I
again.
can share my screen again. Yeah, I feel like that's probably right. Maybe. I might turn it on. Okay. So that was Google's fuck up. And the CEO actually even like dipped in, like Sundar like tweeted, like, we're gonna like fix this stat, which I thought was like kind of an issue. It was sort of interesting that it rose to the level of the CEO-ness. And they also had like a beer issue. I don't know if you remember, there was like beer in a mug, and then there was froth. But then there was like this 2-inch gap between a beer and a froth. Like the froth was just sort of like floating out there, and they've like now fixed that as well. So I'm gonna answer a slightly different question, which is over the last couple of years, because there was like a lot of conflicts or inconsistencies, the designers and the various platforms have tried to do a better job of like coordinating what an image looks like before it kind of pops out into the world and trying to get on the same page. So one of the big debates was like razor emoji, like whether or not it should be like a straight razor or would be like a I guess I call it a disposable razor. And I think Microsoft at some point had a straight razor, and the proposal was a straight razor, but we were like, we should get a more disposable razor because it reflects, it's more gender inclusive in that kind of case. So what they've also tried to make things consistent that were less consistent. So for example, there was a face called, there's a yellow face that is technically, the name is called, quote, dizzy face. And the vast majority of the vendors drew that as like a spiral eyes, right? Because we're dizzy. It's a logical thing to do. But whoever designed it at Apple way back when decided to do it as like an eyes with X's, which I guess maybe in some culture that's a way to convey dizziness. So you would send between different platforms, and if you're sending, the ones with the X's, it shows up as spiral eyes here. So much discussion. But first of all, one of the rules they now have is like, you don't describe like the emotion behind it. You literally describe like face with spiral eyes, face with X eyes, right? So that there is not ambiguity. One of the places where there is ambiguity, and I'm kind of sad about this, is someone we worked with did a kneeling emoji, sort of in spirit of Colin Kaepernick. And so the proposal he put together, we helped him, he's a designer, actually he was a designer at Google, which is interesting, is person kneeling on one knee. And so we call it person kneeling. If you go look, the proposal is one knee. I don't know what happened in sort of like the design guidance, but in almost all the platforms except for Google, it is person kneeling on two knees, which is completely the opposite, I think, meaning that you're trying to convey. So Google has one knee, all the other vendors have two knees. The original guidance image was one knee, but everyone else went in this other direction. So we should definitely in the future, person kneeling on one knee, person kneeling on two knees, whatever. And now this year, after, I don't know, it's this year and it hasn't hit the phones, or it's coming soon. Yes, we're in 2021. Now there's both an X, person with X eyes and then like dizzy face, and somehow they clean it up. The main problem with cleaning up the emoji is that when you change the image, it doesn't only affect the emoji use going forward, but because of the way that emoji are encoded, it actually impacts everything going back. So this is a big issue with Apple. They decided, without really, as far as I'm aware, consulting anyone, decided to switch the gun emoji into a water pistol, green water pistol, just like one day, whoop, it became green. And all the other vendors were like, what just happened? And, there's some logic to it. There have been like a couple of court cases where homicide cases where the gun emoji was part of an exchange that ultimately led to someone shooting someone else. And whether or not the gun emoji is considered a threat or escalation or bullying or whatever. So once you make it a water pistol, then you kind of remove that. So it's a very interesting example in terms of the platforms having a very strong point of view as to what is and is not allowable or what they're comfortable with in terms of expression, which is very different, I think, from like all of the debate that was going on in terms of YouTube and Facebook and Google, like hate speech, like what we will and will not allow. So in that world, they're very much like, or historically, they were much like, oh, hands off, we'll like do something if it's illegal, but not like, who are we to say like what is and isn't allowed? Whereas in the emoji front, they actually have a very strong, sometimes they have a very strong worldview. So an example of that is a couple of years ago, I proposed a rope emoji. This is part of my like Settlers of Catan kind of kick, where you had like wood and brick and stone, and I wanted a rope. And then there was a big debate because they're like, oh, rope, like lynching, like that's like a weird connotation. Like we don't want people to, to be threatened by that. And so no rope, it became a knot, but it's also not a threatening knot. If there is a knot emoji on your phone, it is like a knot that's used in like sailing. It's a very non-threatening square knot. And there was a lot of discussion about that. And so it's clear in that kind of context that there is a worldview in, at least in the world of emoji, or when the platforms get together, they feel comfortable having worldviews. I think when they're separate, they don't necessarily have worldview. They don't feel comfortable asserting worldviews. So that may change clearly with all of the debate and discussion. So I don't know if I answered your question, but there were a lot of good anecdotes in there. So I hope that helped. Yeah. Yes.
What happens between the time that Unicode says and they actually appear? Like,
Yeah.
and how much, like, is it just a reference that you provide, or do you provide like bitmaps that they actually use, or actual libraries of keywords?
Yeah. So
Or is it on that?
yes. Do they do the rest of the? I have to repeat the question, I assume, right? So two questions. Or one giant question. It's like between the question is basically between when Unicode's like, here, next year's emoji, and they appears on your phone. What is the huge process that goes on? And then, and what is it that Unicode is actually providing beyond? Is it just like, here's an emoji, guys, good luck? So I can only talk, luckily, I can only talk about the process at the top level because I'm not kind of in the weeds of the implementation. But from what I observe, one of the reasons, so it takes a lot to actually add characters into Unicode. And I would say, like, for a long time, before emoji came along, Unicode had gotten kind of like sleepy, like in terms of like it done all the major languages where there was more than 1 million people speaking it, right? So Thai, Aramaic, like it was good. It was getting into some like pretty like I don't know, obscure is the right word, but we saw like underrepresented languages or 14th century Indonesian script for something. So it gotten kind of like academic, I think is probably a good way to put it. Gotten kind of academic. And to the point where some platforms didn't update, Unicode every year because like, yeah, who cares? Like there's no one using like these obscure like Indonesian or like, medieval like scripts. That'll change when emoji came along and people really wanted their emoji. And so that had an impact in a couple of ways. So one is a lot of the things that emoji need, like in terms of the Zwidge sequences or, this kind of idea of the way that the skin tone modifiers work, which now in retrospect we should have done as Zwidge sequences, but back then they decided to use them as modifiers. That all has sort of an underlying technology that, people were kind of like meh, like about if you were an implementer or, a programmer, but because people get really upset when their emoji doesn't work on, inside WordPress or inside, what's another one that was really interesting? I think WordPress was one where I was like very upset. They are very motivated to implement everything that supports emoji, and the sort of downstream product is that it helps the support of a lot of these underrepresented languages. So it's like this emoji comes and like support, kind of brings support in general for Unicode, and everyone's really motivated to update it every year at this point because people are like, my God, what do you mean I can't get my like lobster emoji? So in terms of what happens is one of the reasons we actually moved all the cycles up and down was because before it was too compressed a time schedule between when you knew the emoji were what was coming down a pipeline and then the amount of time it took in terms of the update of the operating system. So this is what I understand. So Apple basically, iOS updates its operating system once a year, usually first week of November. So it's coming soon. Usually on the 0.1 release of their operating system. So, 14.0, and then 14.1 is when all the emoji pop up. I think Android also updates it once a year. Microsoft is funny because they do it twice a year. And so what's going on? So one is these characters did not exist before. So you're actually going deep in the operating kind of system level to be like, oh, you see the sequence of zeros and ones, like this should map to like this other like emoji here, which is one of the reasons why those Zwidge sequences are a little bit easier to implement because you're actually not, they're taking two existing emoji and they're basically saying like, if you see these emoji together, like rainbow and flag and your Zwidge, just like boom, like you can make a rainbow flag. So what happened, which is actually interesting, is that in 2020, because the world ended and there was a pandemic, we basically lost the cycle in emojiness, and the only emoji that came in 2020, or maybe arrived in 2021. No, the only emoji that arrived 2021, so this year. I'm trying to actually remember. Okay, they're already on my phone. Okay, are ones that existed through emoji like concatenation. So there's like a heart with a band-aid on it. There is like a face that's like in clouds, I think. And those were the ones that were able to be fast-tracked because it didn't involve like going deep into the Unicode release and like encoding from the ground up. So that's one thing. You are often, it's like the deepest levels of the operating system programmers are usually working on that. So the interesting thing is, in contrast, something like Twitter web, the fastest ones to implement, because they're like, whatever, it's like they can update not on a device level, but actually just like on the web. So when the emoji or Unicode is sort of released, whenever it is, the first one out of the gate generally is Twitter web, and then the last one in is usually iOS. So that's one thing. In terms of what we're doing, and this again is, I'm probably not as involved with this, is you're coming, this is fun. So you're giving them a guidance image, you're giving them what we call the code point, or the series of ones and zeros that kind of connect to that guidance image. The next thing you're doing is giving a bunch of keywords I think jellyfish, for example, invertebrate was we have lots of other invertebrates, so I don't necessarily know why that's the one that got identified with the keyword invertebrate. Then the super fun one is all of those gets translated into languages all around the world. So this actually ends up being an interesting, where this kind of ended up being interesting was German. So as part of our gender inclusiveness, we have what was traditionally a male emoji, then you added female versions, and then you kind of also wanted the gender neutral version, or we sometimes say non-gender binary. You guys will see it in a bunch of different places now. So, and that was partially because there was a designer involved, Paul Hunt, who is at Adobe, and it kind of was meant to be inclusive in the sense that oftentimes when we have words in English, like person, teacher, pilot, there's no gender implied, right? So once you create all the female and male pilots, if you wanted to imply pilot, you would have to pick a male representation or a female representation, right? So then that seemed wrong in all kinds of ways. So we started originally with child, adult, and older adult, so gender neutral versions, right? Because you didn't necessarily want to say boy or girl or whatever. So it's fine. And then slowly we kind of added like the gender neutral versions of all of this. So then, you could have male pilot, female pilot, and just pilot. So it turns out, from my understanding, this is a problem for the German keywords, because in many cases, everything is gendered. So there's no gender neutral version. So, again, I'm not a German expert, but this bubbled up in one of the meetings, that everything's like actor, actress, waiter, waitress, like all the way down. So they don't necessarily have what is the gender neutral kind of term for waiter or waitress. And I think this is not just an emoji problem, but I think is a general kind of, woke problem that they're dealing with in Germany right now. So that's also what happens. So you come up with the keywords, then you have to program all of this and send it out into all the different operating systems and all the different languages. So that is partially why it takes so long. That it has to work not just in English, but it has to work with all languages that these operate. These very, very multinational tech companies support.
I think we're
Are we good?
at time.
Yay!
Thank you so much.
Yay, thank you. Thank you for coming. Do we have any
Anyone else would like
questions?
to ask a question?